Hi everyone, and boy howdy, do I have a massive load of Sonic news to blow over every one of your faces. So by now you've likely seen the headlines that Sega has confirmed they are planning on remaking older titles, which seems like a 180 from the take they gave exactly 1 year ago, where Iizuka quite literally explained the reason why, saying, quote, "That's why there's no remaster." So things are clearly very different now and are still updating fast. But at the same time, there's also a breaking story that's only beginning to emerge, with Sonic Movie 3 having quietly begun filming, which we've known about for a little bit, but are only finally now getting a very generous amount of live shots of the sets, characters, some props, and more that are still coming in as I speak. Plus, the reasonings to a bunch of changes they made in terms to casting and locations, which, with how much this production is being affected by the writer's strike, is one of the most interesting stories from this and will 100% impact the final results of this film. And I know it took a minute for everything we got to come in, but even right now, as we speak, a lot of news is dropping from this, especially regarding Sonic 3, which we'll get into after covering all the available information on the future remasters and covering what's changed internally at Sega after the critical failure of Sonic Colors Ultimate. So this is probably going to be one of the biggest news videos I've made in months, as it also doubles as the kickoff to my Sonic 3 coverage. So let's get into the beginning of this massive pile of news.
Hey, yo, this is our show.
In an interview Japanese gaming outlet Famitsu had with Sega president Yukio Sugino. Yo, call me Yukio Sugino the way I ain't Sugino. What's up guys, Jadel here, welcome back to the Sonic Show. And in this interview, the topic of remakes came up, but there's also a lot of other future Sonic info given in this interview too. Now, one thing that gets addressed here that I see people freaking out a lot over recently is the imaginary boogeyman of Sega removing mods and betraying the PC community. And the only reason given is generally among the lines of,
well, sure, Sega of America said they care about mods in the community, but the fascies over at Sega of Japan just don't get our epic PC gaming culture.
And again, this is earlier in the same interview where the Sonic remakes are discussed, but I do think it's important, and first want to read the statement from Sega's president that indicates their direction in the overall PC gaming market. So, Yukio Sugino says, Sega has always been in the top 10 best-selling games on Steam, partly because it has a lot of European development studios, and in this way, we've been involved in the PC game market for a long time. And now that it's finally spread in earnest in Japan and other Asian countries, we are now working even more aggressively. For a while, the price of PCs skyrocketed due to the shortage of semiconductors. And the interviewer then asks, and it's not a question, which is why I have to clarify, but they ask, with the spread of gaming PCs, download sales have also expanded. I feel that the lifespan of game titles has also been extended, which, with Fortnite having been one of the biggest games for the past 6 years now, is definitely boding true. Sugino responds to the sorta question, saying, as someone who develops games, isn't the significance of joining this industry to have as many people as possible play the games we make? In that sense, frankly, it makes me happy to see my creations lined up on shelves forever. So, with PC gaming not just gaining popularity in the West, but having a new renaissance in Japan and the East too, then modding, which is what sells a majority of these older titles, isn't going anywhere, especially since in one of their most recent financial reports, they specifically call mods out as a big seller. So, I'd only expect more accessibility to modding in their games, not less, which I think is great news. And even with stuff forever ago, like the Omen situation, you have to remember that Katie and her team looked over all the Ouroboros stuff and specifically gave them permission. And I imagine at least someone from the inside would have mentioned if any of these situations that we've had ultimately had any implication for the modding community, which again, not only haven't they said anything, but why would they give permission if this was the case? Sonic fans, think! Regardless, to move past the topic of mods, as this really is a massive interview, like maybe one of the biggest I've ever seen, so I'm obviously only going to pluck out the more interesting and relevant bits, as this interview covers literally everything going on with Sega lately, and there's really only a few things I want to pull from it before we move on to Sonic Movie 3 coverage. Another thing they briefly cover is the fact that a Sega Saturn and Dreamcast Mini, while anticipated, frankly isn't happening and is way too over their heads in terms of technical power that it requires. So they have to put a pause on the mini consoles until they can tackle the hardware issues that makes them difficult to produce at an affordable price right now. And the price point is one of the biggest selling factors when it comes to these mini consoles, so Sega does still want to do them, but they've also made it clear that it's going to be a good long wait until these things see the light of day again, especially the Dreamcast one. We're not seeing that guy for a while. Next, they also mention a really cool program that Sega's recently launched, but then followed up with potentially some of the most classic Japanese over overwork crunch rhetoric I've ever heard. So they mentioned a cool program where when having kids, they have a system that guarantees the same salary as full-time employees when working part-time up until the kid reaches the age of 3. A pretty cool idea from the outside that I actually do like. But it gets followed up with this excerpt that I'll just read completely. So Sugano adds on, however, I hope that you can work with a sense of security. Egg freezing assistance is not yet a major thing, but I myself was late in having children, and there were quite a few friends around me who were worried about not being able to have children, which is frankly the reality for many countries, and especially Japan. But then it continues with, so of course, I want to support the costs, but first of all, I want you to know that there is a thing called egg freezing, and I want you to live your own way as much as possible, which I do agree you should for the most part live your life however you want, but they even acknowledge freezing is not a major thing, and that's because it's insanely expensive and definitely not a painless, fun experience for the woman. And then when you look at many of the declining birth rates, the reality is you kinda have to have kids, just like your parents did and loved you. In fact, everyone has parents, so it's kind of a relatable message, right? I'm not going to distract from the main point of this video, which is Sonic remakes and Sonic Movie 3, but if you think Japan, or to make it personal, wherever you view as your own community, is as nice and having an overall good vibe to the people around them and the place, then you literally have to have kids because nobody else is going to do that for you, especially not the millennials. Come on, look at them. I think they're practically worse than the boomers. This idea of simply being able to wait until after you've had a full career is a common falsely believed rhetoric that leads to a mass depression in older women. And Sega's president even mentions their personal friends' concerns over that, which again, especially now with how low fertility rates are, they're 100% absolutely right to be concerned about. You know, you should be concerned. I'm not trying to go on a spiel or lecture you, but I do think it's important that younger people keep this in mind as they progress through life. Don't even bother touching grass. What you need is the touch of a woman. So back on track away from Japan and the global fertility crisis. See, you guys can't say I don't keep it real with you. So in response to a question saying, Sonic Frontiers was a new challenge in the Sonic series, but Sonic Superstars has a reboot aspect. And Sugano responds by writing, of course, we have to do new things, but not all IPs are the same for new releases and reboots. For each IP, we choose which method is appropriate at this time, such as, this method is best for this IP. Sonic is Sega's flagship IP, and we're considering reboots and remakes in parallel with new titles. Meaning, yes, this statement is quite different from the one given exactly 1 year ago by Takashi Iizuka. However, it's not necessarily a contradiction with Iizuka's statement either. See, Takashi said he would rather make a new adventure game than focusing on a remaster, which Kishimoto has also said he wants the next game to be in the style of a more adventure format. But it's been a very long time since there's been an adventure game. It's even been a long time since they were brought to the Xbox 360 and PS3. So a remake or remaster of the adventure games will be a great way to get fans engaged again. And hey, maybe pick up some new fans along the way. Ones who can't tolerate the clunking graphics that came at the time of the original adventure games. And while I love those games, as a zoomer, even though they are really good, just from the awkward cutscenes and clunkiness, I really can't qualify it for my favorite one with that alone. However, if they make a remaster of it, which if they do, it's almost certain Blind Squirrel will have zero involvement as they fumbled the Sonic Colors Ultimate bag so hard, it's borderline undone all the good they've created in any of their previous remasters or ports. I even think the FBI should investigate Blind Squirrel, and maybe the IRS should audit them after that, because something weird with money was going on there. I'm telling you. And I know a lot of people in the comments are gonna cope for Sonic Colors Ultimate and say, come on, Jaden, it wasn't the worst ever. It was a good game. And no, it wasn't the worst ever, but I'd rather 343 Industries take a crack at it than Sega hand this over to Blind Squirrel for them only to put out the world's most mediocre remaster of one of the most beloved 3D platformers of all time. If they mess up Sonic Adventure, there will be like riots in the streets. Kai Cenat was only the beginning. Now, on this take, many people might disagree with me, but I think it's the underrated Giga Chad move to remake Sonic Heroes, and the main reason being, it's really the only possible universe I can see where this game is widely beloved and well received by almost everyone. Sonic Heroes has a lot of room for improvement, so people won't be mad if it doesn't play one-to-one with the original, which, if it was an adventure remake, people would be mad if it's either too similar and borderline unchanged, or too different and doesn't feel and play like the same experience. Realistically, nobody will be happy. However, with Heroes, I think a little bit of change would actually be appreciated by almost everyone. And it also has such remarkable marketing, those words sound weird together, and branding that it's single-handedly one of the best-selling Sonic games ever. And with a roster of so many playable characters, while hardly different, will 100% 100% still sell the game to kids and parents who, it's sad to say, but they only see value in the characters that their kids love. They don't know why, but their kid just loves Shadow and Rouge, and they see her on the back, and they're like, I gotta buy this game for my kid. I don't know why he's into this Bat character so much. Maybe he has some issues to talk about with his therapist. I do think it would be one of the best and smartest decisions Sega has ever made if they chose Sonic Heroes to fully remake, and that's despite the barrage of constant comments I receive anytime I mention it, telling me Sonic Heroes is actually worse than the entirety of the Vietnam War. Which, come on, I think is personally a bit debatable if you ask me. But enough of that. So now with the Sega interview out of the way, there's nothing distracting us from focusing our eyes on the prize. Let's get into what personally excites me the most about this entire news drop. Sonic Movie 3. Now, for those stressing, no, there aren't any spoilers in any of these screenshots or clips. And regardless of that, I will warn you whenever we start getting footage or anything like that down the line that includes anything that could be perceived as a spoiler. I did this during my Sonic 2 coverage, so really nothing's going to be different here. Another thing to mention is most of the photos or clips I'm covering here today were discovered and found by @Sonic1News on Twitter, which shout out because he was a super useful resource and they follow Based Raccoon Man. Come on, round of applause. But for now, we actually have a very decently generous amount of pics from the set, as well as some Knuckles series stuff, which I'll touch on throughout this. And apparently all of that is finished filming, so it's only a matter of time until we get a teaser trailer for it. But again, eyes on the prize, focusing on Sonic 3. Cut to a week or so ago, and a bit ahead of schedule, Sonic 3 has begun its principal photography, mostly just doing outdoor shots that wouldn't involve cast, which for a movie that follows CGI anthropomorphic creatures, there will be a lot of shots and scenes that don't require cast on set.
Also, quick breaking update.
Hey everybody, I just wanted to let you know I'm being shadow banned on Instagram.
Apparently, if the strike doesn't change, filming without actors isn't going to change either. Which, even though it's CGI, considering it has Ben Schwartz in it, it might be like a silent film. Probably won't happen, it'll probably be like normal, but it's fun to think about. Now, back to the present.
In fact, Hollywood is so secretive about this stuff, it's likely they've already shot a bit in remote, more foreign areas around the world, just like they did for the snowy areas in Sonic 2. But these new pics and clips are just their first shots that are in a somewhat populated area, like the town of Black Park, England, which they're currently shooting at. Now, if you watch any coverage from the first two Sonic movies productions, you'll know that both films were primarily shot in Canada. So reasonably, many of you are going to wonder why the sudden change to the UK. And yes, while the reasoning for this is multifaceted, there's one main reason that is more significantly above any others, and this isn't a joke, by the way. But unironically, with the SAG-AFTRA's writer's strike, movies and shows aren't getting produced here in the same way right now. And for anyone who dares stand up to big Hollywood, that we all definitely totally love the writing of, well, these people are getting their entire careers crushed and destroyed just for promoting their movies that they're contractually obligated to do. Even Mr. Beast, who received an exception to promote his appearance in the TMNT movie, got destroyed online.
Grr, Mr. Scab, grr.
But with entire careers and many millions of dollars on the line, like many hundreds of millions of dollars, the pressure is very clearly on for most of these actors, especially since they're the face of the film. That means if it flops, then this will potentially be their last and final film gig ever, at least in this AAA massive budget styled Hollywood experience. So a lot of pressure is on the line for everyone here. It's definitely not a good situation to be in on either side, but it's important to keep in mind the situation here in the US is definitely not worldwide. The reason they're not returning to Canada or the United States is the United Kingdom actually has laws that make strikes like this across New York and Hollywood insanely illegal. These writers' protests are simply not happening there. And I don't mean like 5 over the speed limit illegal, but closer to go to jail, do not pass go, do not collect $200 illegal. And while the UK does criminalize a lot of things that we would find normal and legal, and as a, a freedom person, I'd normally be against them. However, as someone who does want Sonic 3 made, I don't mind the loophole. Crucify me on the No Longer Bird app, because I know many people want to support the strike, but there's only 2 possible outcomes from this situation. A, Sonic 3 and Knuckles remains in Canada and the US, but it gets delayed until the strike ends, which at this rate could be actually multiple years, or even never happen if the companies just get new people to make this stuff and adapt. Unions do protect workers, but if the workers are on strike, then the union isn't going to back them up and help them until the strike ends. No one's crossing that line. And if you do cross the line, the union's not going to support you. You have Hollywood mad at you and the unions. That's not a good place to be in. Or option B, Sonic 3 Knuckles films in the UK, and instead of getting delayed potentially many years, like how Top Gun 2 was filmed forever before it was released. In this scenario, Sonic 3 comes out in the expected timeline and potentially only a few months max of schedule changes. Also, let's be real, nobody can stand modern television, and the idea that the Good Doctor and Velma writers, who are already in the top 1% of wealth and live in a fairly luxurious lifestyle in LA, especially when more and more work is accessible remotely, and you're telling me they deserve a ton more pay? Them? But who knows, maybe I'm wrong on this, you know. I don't have a firm stance on this, I don't like modern television and movies, so. Regardless, I'm bringing this up to also mention that this will 100% have an effect on some level of casting. If they're looking for background characters and even smaller speaking roles to show up, there will definitely still be big budget cameos like the handful we had before, but the smaller roles that would normally just go to whoever signs up for the casting call will instead go to a new pool of British actors, most likely doing an American accent like Tom Holland or the Walking Dead guy.
But there was, I've got to tell you this, Greg
But who knows, maybe they'll write in them visiting London or something, going through a portal ring. All that to say, don't be surprised if you hear a lot of American accents that just sound a little bit eerie and off. Like, geez, I know this guy's an American, but something sounds wrong. And also, don't expect a lot of people in this one. Isn't this what Sonic fans wanted, though? More anthro characters, less humans. So, with that out of the way, let's get into what you guys want. All the pics and clips we got, with some of these being pretty recent at the time of releasing this. So, first thing I thought was interesting is we see a building a lot of people don't seem to recognize, as they only created a small back bit and are blue screening the rest since, again, they're not in the location that the Wachowskis' house was filmed. But if you look at the other shots of this house, it clearly seems to be the back porch / balcony portion of the house. Now, with how little they built, you know, you can imagine this is only going to be a couple establishing shots before the action kicks off, meaning this film will likely be the first to barely feature them in Green Hills, Montana at all. It seems like they'll only be there briefly at the beginning and maybe at the end, which Sonic 2 also started that way, however, eventually ended up returning home for the last third of the movie. Plus, if you look at another picture we got, they put the car there, Tom's cop car, so it all adds up, folks. It sounds like a duck, it looks like a duck, hell, it even smells like a duck. That means it's a duck. Next, we get an entirely different new house, which, by the way, both are filmed in Black Park, England, and a cool detail about this is the inside, or at least the doorway, is entirely blue screened, which makes sense since they're probably only shooting exterior shots, while the inside is probably filmed in a soundstage in the UK. And speaking of filming inside a soundstage, next we get a picture of exactly that. You can see Tika Sumpter's hand with a Sonic stand-in model and a Tails one. Now, when this was posted, I saw a lot of people unsure if this was from Sonic 2 or Sonic 3. However, after thinking on it and going back to check, Tails actually never goes inside the Wachowskis' home at any part in Sonic 2. So it is possible it's from Knuckles. However, with Tika there and the way it's being shot, I do presume it's from Sonic 3, but I'm keeping an open mind. Now next, there's a wonderful but expected surprise, and that is the first spotting of an actual cast member. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, one that always makes me smile when he's on screen, and that's Max the Golden Retriever. Now, I'll be honest, it is possible a cast member just has a golden retriever on set, but with a mobile trailer that's unique and next to them, it's somewhat safe to assume they're a contracted wildlife and animal coordinator, and this actually is my boy Max. Probably gonna CGI him playing with Sonic or something, and also it's also possible this is just an entirely different golden retriever. I actually didn't even consider this until writing it right now. This isn't even in the script. I didn't even consider the fact that this could just be a different golden retriever that's playing Max. Is Max even the same golden retriever in both movies? Do we even know this? Oh my god. Okay, moving on from that. Next, we get a distant picture of our three boys standing in the woods. Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles just standing there, looking proud. Yeah, there's nothing else to say about this one. I mean, they're really just standing there, but...
I mean, they do just be standing there.
Now, we also got some casting info for a bunch of roles and some ideas of things to see in the Knuckles series, which is really exciting, but I've covered so much, and this video is really long enough as it is, but I'm hopefully back into the flow of things, so another video soon, and I'm sorry for the lack of content on both the public feed and for members. I've been dealing with a lot of stuff personally behind the scenes, but as you can tell from the fact that I uploaded, you're watching this, things are getting better, you know? So that's all for today. Follow on Twitter, or X. It's actually called X now. The link in the description will say Twitter though. I would say join memberships, but since, you know, I haven't been putting out content, I feel kind of guilty promoting that. I have a members editing guide filmed and borderline finished editing, but man, I just haven't been able to finish it. Also, it doesn't help that the person that I was going to use as the editor got outed for inappropriate things. But video over, like, sub, and lots of love. Peace. Peace.
okay? Bye.